Hey friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. I'm spending some time this week with the 2016 Chrysler 300S. Now, I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit let down that when they redesigned this car in 2015, they stopped offering the SRT. Do you remember that one? 6.4 liter V8, fire breathing. The thing was a monster to drive, a lot of fun. Now, Chrysler knows they still have some customers that have a pulse that want a little bit of a sporting drive, so that's what the 300S is all about. Now, it's available with a V6, a little bit more powerful than the standard version, and of course, the 5.7 liter Hemi V8, now the largest and most powerful engine it's available with. So my question in test driving it today is, can it be just as much fun? Selecting the S changes the character of the Chrysler 300 from a boulevard cruiser to something a bit more sporting to look at. For starters, it loses all the bright chrome for the blacked out variety, which is nice. The biggest thing you notice is its unique gloss black grille up front that really pops on a white test car. Headlamps are halogen HIDs with LED daytime running lights, and down low you'll barely notice them, but it's actually got LED fog lights too. A well-integrated deck spoiler frames out the rear along with big dual exhaust tips, which are a must on a car like this. Wheels are 20-inch aluminum alloy with a toned-down hyper black finish, mounted up with 245/45 series rubber. Note that if you option all-wheel drive, it does come with smaller 19-inch wheels. Our tester had the $3,295 300S Premium Group, which added a lot of extras to the interior, starting with a huge power-opening panoramic sunroof. It goes a long way to lighting up the dark interior, which in ours had the Detroit, Michigan interior theme in black and ambassador blue, named after the bridge from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario, Canada. The cabin was thoroughly redesigned starting with 2015, which improved the materials quality and softened its design. The dash and door panels all have a heavy rubbery feel that's much improved over the last generation. Trims in the 300S are piano black for the center stack, and a carbon fiber-like trim spans the dash, the door panels, and the console. And on that console, you'll find a rotary dial shift selector that replaced the traditional lever last year. Its power seats up front are both heated and ventilated and were easily set to the happy place for both taller and shorter drivers in our office. Of note, the steering wheel tilts and telescopes manually here, and there were no memory settings to save positions. Overall, I like this interior pretty well, but there's one thing that I'm just not jiving on, and that is this rotary dial selector for the transmission. Now, what they've got here is a dial instead of a lever. So what you do is you twist it and you put it in gear. It just doesn't have the intuitiveness of a lever, and especially for a sporting car like this, when you get to know your car and you like to drive your car, you can put it into gear by feel. You don't need to look down here. This car, you actually have to look down and see what the selector's saying to know what gear you're in, and it's just a bit of a distraction, especially if you're in a parking lot, if you're around town. There's been a number of times this week where I've had this car where I've actually been in the wrong gear, not really knowing it because it just doesn't have that intuitiveness that a lever has. Now, I get this for a luxury car, but for a sporting car like this, they really need to bring back the lever. Another interesting thing to note was its traditional dial clock mounted high above the touchscreen. As you can see, it's right next to a digital clock, and as it turns out, they're not set to the same brain, so they have to be set separately, and they can be incorrect from each other. Looking at the infotainment system here, this is the top-of-the-line 552-watt 10-speaker Beats audio system with navigation and Uconnect suite of functionalities. The sound is reasonably good, but it outpowers the interior trim's ability to stay quiet. Using its interface is easy and straightforward either with the touchscreen or the steering wheel controls. This is one of the better and more easy-to-use infotainment systems out there, and it always wins praise from me. Later in this video, I'm going to compare this car to a muscle car like a Mustang, a Camaro, or a Challenger, and I know that already because I've already filmed that section, probably TMI, but anyway, my point's going to be that this has a huge back seat that you're never going to find in one of those muscle cars. Now, as you can see right here, I'm quite comfortable. I've got a lot of space. I'm about 5'8" to 5'9", so I've got a lot of room here, a lot of leg room. These seats aren't all the way up and they're not all the way back. Headroom, I've got about 3 inches above my balding head here, and that's even with this big, huge panoramic sunroof, which is great because it lets in a lot of light, but most of the time, these things take about an inch or two out of the headroom, and
there's very little missing here. So it's a very large space that I think most people are going to like. They're never going to be cramped in, but more important than that, this has a lot of nice amenities back here. You've got heating and air conditioning vents, very important here in Arizona where it can get blazing in the summertime. There's also 2 USB ports, 2 of them, count them. So if your passengers are back here, they've got devices they need charging or they're going to be playing with something, that's a really nice touch. And some cars don't even offer that at any price. And the last thing is, these are actually pretty comfortable seats. You actually sit down in them. There's side bolstering here and here, and they really sort of hold you. So, you know, I'd be pretty comfortable back here all day on a road trip if I didn't have OCD issues about other people driving.
The rear seats do fold down in a 60-40 split to expand the trunk space if needed, which even on its own is pretty impressive with 16.3 cubic feet, though you do lose some of that space with the Beats Audio subwoofer. And under its floor is a spare tire, which I always like to see in a car market fast getting rid of them. When it comes to scoring the interior, materials are good but still lean toward the American car realm, and that rotary shift selector really hurts the ergonomics in my view, giving us 4 out of 5 stars here. Technologies, which include the infotainment and driver aids like rear view camera and things like blind spot alerts, are all well laid out and function well, earning 5 of 5 stars. What's under the hood of our tester is Chrysler's venerable 363 horsepower 5.7-liter Hemi V8 that, on the 300S, comes with a louder performance exhaust system, and while it doesn't up the power, it sounds much more aggressive. Notable with this vehicle is the Sport mode that makes quite a few changes to the powertrain's behavior. It reduces shift times of its 8-speed transmission from 400 to 250 milliseconds and increases throttle response dramatically.
Love the sound of a V8. Woo! And that's what you get when you option this thing, because it doesn't have the kind of power that the old 6.4 liter had, but it sure has that nice sound. Beauty. Now, that out of the way, this does have the new 8-speed automatic transmission that they just put in this a year or so back, and it's a wonderful gearbox, especially when it's in sport mode down here on the rotary gear shifter. Anyway, it works pretty well. And there's also here the paddle shifters, which allow you to shift it manually. So I'm going to downshift coming into a corner here, and it just doesn't. Paddle shifters suck, and I don't care who makes them. They never quite work the way you want them to. That's why I like a good old-fashioned lever here that you can manhandle, because these paddle shifters, they're just toys. That's all they are.
Fuel economy, in spite of my throttle mashing, came out not that terrible. The EPA rates it at 16 mpg city, 25 mpg highway, and 19 mpg combined. I achieved the as-promised 19 mpg combined in my week with the car. One of the technologies that enables this is its multiple displacement engine that shuts off 4 of its cylinders at cruising speeds and coast when power isn't needed to save fuel. It works reasonably well, but you can feel the transitions between the two modes sometimes. All in, the powertrain is pretty impressive and fun to drive, even though it doesn't have the ba-boom of the 6.4-liter SRT engine that was once available here. It scores 4 of 5 stars.
When it comes to ride and handling, whether you're on the freeway or out here on a windy back road, this is a car that's always had good road manners, and that comes by way of the fact that when it was originally developed, it was based on the Mercedes-Benz E-Class chassis. That was a couple generations ago, but what that offers is a nice tight turn-in that feels just as sharp and refined as some of the best European cars out there. Now, it is a big heavy car, so you feel that when you throw it into a corner, and of course you feel it when you step on the accelerator, but it feels very tight. And this one's actually tuned with a pretty firm suspension because it is the S model, and it's dialed in for those 20-inch wheels and low-profile tires, so it's got a very staccato ride, which is to say you feel every bit of the road surface. And of course, when you hit bumps, when you go over tar strips, expansion joints, you're going to feel those too. It doesn't quite have the boulevard ride that you're going to expect in the base 300 sedan. So if that's what you're looking for, you probably want to skip the S package.
The 300S has a sport-tuned suspension featuring stiffer dampers front and rear, stiffer springs, thicker anti-roll bars, and tighter bushings, all to take advantage of its larger tires and wheels. And when you dial up the sport mode, the steering feel gets heavier too, making backroad maneuvers more of an interplay. Though I praise it, its handling still has a few quirks, like a rough crash over harder bumps and a shudder in its structure, but these are only occasional intrusions. Overall, it earns 4 or 5 stars in the chassis department. With American-branded cars, right or wrong, quality is always a concern of many buyers, more often so than import brands. And here, the 300 sedan does better than it used to in the basics of fit and finish, particularly inside. The exterior was the only place I found a few minor things to quibble about with body fit, but it still comes in at 4 or 5 stars for overall quality feel. When it comes to safety, the Chrysler 300 is one of the older designs on the market structurally, which shows up in its IIHS crash testing. While it earned good on most of their tests, and this year has superior crash prevention systems available, it only achieved a marginal rating on the new small overlap crash test, thus it's not eligible to be a top safety pick.
Well, folks, rounding it up for the 300S, I gotta say I do like this package. It's got nice visuals, and I kind of like those blue leather seats. Now, the good news about those is if you don't like them, you can get the interior in black. In fact, there are some colors that this car comes in, like red. You can't even get the blue leather seats at all. So it really is a package that I think does offer up a nice sporting character, although not quite as bonkers as the old SRT was. Now, as we look at the specs here, 19 mpg is what I got this week with it. That's a combined city and highway. Not bad for a car like this, I don't think. V8 rear-wheel drive. I mean, if you compare it to a Mustang, a Challenger, or a Camaro with a V8, you're going to be in the same neighborhood. And here, of course, you get back doors and a seat people can actually sit in, quite comfortably, I might add. So anyway, the other thing to talk about here is the price. $43,000 and some change. You can spend a little bit more and you can spend less. This has a pretty good package on it. I think that's a pretty good value overall though, because how many other rear-wheel drive V8 sedans this big are you going to buy from anywhere really? Chevrolet has the SS, but it's a little bit smaller and it's kind of a different animal. And your other options are really Japan and Germany, and you're going to spend a whole lot more money there. So in my view, we're at a value of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything else we've already talked about, we're at 4 stars for the week. Not too bad. I'm Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. I hope you enjoyed the ride. You know, I've been spending the week down here in Arizona during the wintertime driving a big white Chrysler with a Michigan plate. Now here, those are usually the telltale signs of what we call a snowbird. What's a snowbird? Well, they're the winter visitor, the resident that lives here 6 months out of the year. They're from the snow states where they stay during the summertime and they come down here in the wintertime because they can't hack the cold where they're from. And so what happens is they come down here and they clog our streets driving slow, they clog our restaurants making it hard to get in, they clog the gym sitting on all the machines chatting with each other like a coffee shop, and what else do? They make it hard at the supermarket because they argue with the people at the check stand about their coupons, and it goes on and on and on. They're not all that well liked. So it was probably quite surprising to my fellow Arizonians that this Chrysler wasn't doddering along in the fast lane at 57 miles an hour. But anyway, if you like the test drive you just saw, click on the link right here and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We test drive 1, sometimes 2 vehicles every week, plus we have a new video almost every single day. There's always something new, and we love all of our viewers, even the snowbirds. So check it out, click on the link, stay tuned.